I sit in the lawyer's office, surrounded by tension. My son, Jeremy, smirks confidently across the mahogany table. "You get $3, Dad," Jeremy announces mockingly, ready to inherit his mother's $250 million fortune after years of poisoning her against me. The lawyer, Mr. Harrington, adjusts his glasses and begins reading Patricia's will. I feel 20 years of painful memories resurface, the bitter divorce, losing my family business to Patricia, and my son's growing resentment. But I have a secret that's about to change everything. As Mr. Harrington carefully arranges the documents, my mind drifts back to the beginning. Patricia and I met in college, both ambitious dreamers from middle-class families in suburban Ohio. She studied business administration while I focused on computer engineering. We fell in love over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of building something meaningful together. We married in 1984, just as the tech revolution was beginning to transform America. Patricia worked as an account manager at a local advertising firm, while I took a job with a computer hardware manufacturer. Every evening, we'd sit at our tiny kitchen table in our starter home, sketching out plans for what would eventually become Montgomery Tech Solutions. "We're going to change the world, Hudson," Patricia would say, her eyes bright with ambition as we mapped out business models on paper napkins. In 1988, we took the leap. I designed our first network security system in our garage, while Patricia handled the business plan. We mortgaged our house, emptied our savings, and borrowed from our parents to launch the company. The first 2 years were brutal, living on ramen noodles and working 18-hour days. But Patricia's business acumen matched perfectly with my technical innovations. By 1993, we had 50 employees. Patricia negotiated our first major contract with a regional bank, and suddenly, we were profitable. Jeremy came along in 1994, our miracle baby after struggling with fertility issues. I remember holding him in the hospital, making promises about the legacy we were building. "This is all for you someday, little man," I whispered. The 90s were our golden years. Our company grew exponentially as the internet boom created unprecedented demand for our security solutions. Patricia was brilliant at building client relationships and marketing, while I focused on developing cutting-edge technology. By the turn of the millennium, Montgomery Tech Solutions was valued at over $100 million, with offices in 6 states. Jeremy grew up with privileges neither Patricia nor I had known growing up. The best schools, summer camps, extensive travel, and anything he wanted. Looking back, perhaps we indulged him too much. Patricia especially struggled with telling him no, compensating for long work hours with material gifts. The first cracks in our marriage appeared around 2007. Patricia turned 45 and seemed to hit a midlife crisis. She began socializing more with younger executives, attending industry parties without me, and spending lavishly on designer clothes and cosmetic procedures. I was still the same pragmatic engineer, content with my modest wardrobe and family dinners. "You've become so boring, Hudson," she complained one night after returning from a gala. "When did you stop wanting to have fun?" I noticed the changes in small ways at first. Patricia started questioning my technical decisions at work. Board meetings became tense, as she aligned with newer board members against my more conservative growth approach. Then I discovered her text messages with Travis Jenkins, our vice president of operations, a smooth-talking MBA 15 years her junior, whom she had personally hired. The confrontation was ugly. Patricia didn't deny the affair but blamed me for emotional neglect. "You're married to your work, not to me," she said, though ironically, work had been our shared passion for decades. Jeremy was 19 and in his sophomore year at Princeton when we separated. I tried to keep him out of our marital problems, but Patricia had other ideas. She began telling him that I was holding the company back with outdated technology and risk-averse strategies, that the company's future growth depended on her vision, not mine. The divorce proceedings blindsided me with their viciousness. Patricia's lawyers discovered a loophole in our company agreement. A clause I had naively signed years earlier gave the majority shareholder certain rights during a corporate restructuring. Through a series of complex legal maneuvers, Patricia managed to dilute my ownership while consolidating hers. "It's just business, Hudson," she said coolly across the mediation table. "Nothing personal." The settlement left her with 80% ownership of Montgomery Tech Solutions. My life's work, my identity, gone. I retained a 20% share but was removed from the board and operations. 22 years of building our company together, erased in 6 months of legal battles. But the worst betrayal came when Jeremy sided with his mother. He had interned at the company during summer breaks and had absorbed Patricia's vision of aggressive expansion and higher profit margins over my approach of sustainable growth and technical excellence. "Mom's right, Dad," "You're too stuck in the past," he told me, during a rare lunch meeting after the divorce was finalized. "The company needs to evolve." What no one knew, what I kept to myself, even during the darkest days of the divorce, was that I had discovered, concerning financial irregularities, in some of Patricia's new business ventures. Off-the-books arrangements with suppliers, questionable international partnerships, and creative accounting that skirted the line of legality. I could have used this information in the divorce, perhaps even reported it to regulatory authorities. But doing so would have tanked the company's stock, devaluing what would eventually be Jeremy's inheritance. Despite everything, I still wanted to protect my son's future. So I maintained my dignity and my silence, walking away with a fraction of what I had helped build, preserving the company's reputation for Jeremy's sake. As Mr. Harrington continues organizing his papers in the present day, I glance at Jeremy across the table. The smirk still plays on his lips, unaware that his entire world is about to change. After the divorce, I moved into a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, a stark contrast to the 12,000-square-foot mansion Patricia and I had built. The initial months were the hardest. I'd wake up reaching for Patricia, only to find empty space beside me. The silence was deafening, after years of family breakfasts and evening conversations. My 20% share of Montgomery Tech provided a comfortable income, but I needed purpose. I established a small consulting firm, helping startups develop security protocols. The work was satisfying in its simplicity, reminding me of the early days with Patricia before wealth complicated everything. Meanwhile, Patricia expanded the company aggressively. She took Montgomery Tech public, making headlines when the IPO valuation hit $1 billion. She became a fixture in business magazines, celebrated as a rare female tech CEO. The company headquarters moved from our original building in Columbus to a gleaming skyscraper in Chicago. Jeremy graduated from Princeton with honors and immediately joined the company as a junior executive. Patricia created a special development program just for him, rotating him through departments to learn all aspects of the business. His graduation photos appeared in the company newsletter, with Patricia proudly standing beside him. I wasn't invited to the ceremony. I tried maintaining a relationship with Jeremy, despite the distance. I sent birthday cards, Christmas gifts, and regular emails. Most went unanswered. The few responses were brief and formal, as if written to a distant acquaintance rather than a father. "Thanks for the gift. Very busy with new projects. We'll call when things slow down." Things never slowed down. Through mutual friends and industry contacts, I heard stories of Jeremy's rapid rise through company ranks and his increasingly lavish lifestyle. He purchased a penthouse in Chicago and a vacation home in Aspen. His Instagram, which I viewed through a dummy account since he had blocked me, showed parties on yachts, courtside seats at Bulls games, and vacations with models and minor celebrities. Patricia enabled and encouraged this behavior, publicly declaring Jeremy as her successor and heir apparent. For his 30th birthday, she gifted him a Ferrari and a 5% stake in the company. The business press dubbed them the Montgomery Dynasty. More concerning were the whispers about Jeremy's business tactics. Former colleagues who still kept in touch told me about his ruthless approach to competition, his habit of taking credit for subordinates' work, and his temper tantrums when challenged. "He's nothing like you, Hudson," my old friend and former head of engineering, Frank Williams, told me over beers. "The kid has no ethical compass. It's all about the win, no matter the cost." I tried convincing myself this was just office politics, people jealous of a young executive's success. But the evidence mounted. 3 senior executives who had been with the company since our early days were pushed out after disagreements with Jeremy. A smaller competitor was allegedly pressured into a disadvantageous merger through questionable tactics. The company's original focus on quality and customer service shifted toward maximizing short-term profits. In the fall of 2023, almost 15 years after our divorce, I received an unexpected phone call from Diane Collins, Patricia's closest friend since college. "Patricia's sick, Hudson," she said, her voice solemn. "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. They're saying 6 months, maybe less." The news hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything that had happened between us, I had never stopped caring about Patricia. "Does Jeremy know?" I asked. "Yes, but..." Diane hesitated. "Things are complicated. Patricia wants to see you. She asked me to arrange a meeting." I was stunned. After 15 years of silence, why now? "She has regrets, Hudson. That's all I can say. Will you come?" A week later, I found myself driving through the security gates of Patricia's Lake Michigan estate. The sprawling property reflected her success, with manicured gardens and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. A housekeeper led me to a sunroom where Patricia waited. The vibrant, forceful woman I remembered had been replaced by someone frail and diminished. Her designer clothes hung loosely on her thin frame, and her once-perfect hair had thinned from treatments. But her eyes still held that sharp intelligence I had fallen in love with decades ago. "Hudson," she said simply. "Thank you for coming." Our conversation started awkwardly, reminiscing about neutral topics from the distant past. She asked about my consulting work, and I inquired about her health treatments. We carefully avoided discussing the divorce or Jeremy. As afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, Patricia's demeanor suddenly shifted. She became more intense, more focused. "Do you remember when we wrote the original articles of incorporation?" she asked unexpectedly. "In that little law office on High Street." Of course. We couldn't afford the fancy corporate lawyers back then. "We included that clause about intellectual property attribution. Your idea?" I nodded, surprised she remembered such a detail. I wanted to ensure every engineer got credit for their innovations. She smiled faintly. "You were always concerned with doing the right thing. I lost sight of that somewhere along the way." Patricia asked more questions about the early days, specific documents, and founding principles of the company. Her interest seemed strangely urgent. I answered truthfully, though I couldn't understand the purpose behind her questions. As I prepared to leave, Patricia grasped my hand, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so ill. "Things aren't always what they seem, Hudson. I need to make things right." Before I could ask what she meant, she was overtaken by a coughing fit. Her nurse appeared, signaling our time was up. I left with more questions than answers, troubled by the encounter. 2 weeks later, Diane called again. Patricia had passed away peacefully in her sleep. The funeral would be private, family only, but there was something else. "Patricia explicitly requested your presence at the reading of her will," Diane informed me. "It's scheduled for next Thursday at the offices of Harrington Beck & Associates." "That seems unusual," I said cautiously. "I wouldn't expect to be included." Patricia was insistent. She made specific arrangements with Mr. Harrington. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the invitation that arrived by courier the next day. I couldn't imagine why Patricia wanted me there, unless it was some final public gesture of reconciliation. Whatever her reasons, I owed it to our shared history to honor her last request. What I couldn't possibly know was that Patricia's strange questions during our final meeting were part of a much larger plan, one that would unravel decades of secrets and lies, and dramatically alter the future for both Jeremy and me. The offices of Harrington, Beck, and Associates occupy the 42nd floor of a downtown Chicago skyscraper. As I step off the elevator, I'm immediately aware of not belonging. My sensible navy suit, purchased off the rack at Macy's, stands in stark contrast to the bespoke attire of the other attendees already gathered in the reception area. Patricia's influence is evident in the crowd awaiting the will reading. There's her younger sister Samantha, elegant in understated black, speaking quietly with their brother Alan. Diane Collins notices me and offers a sympathetic smile. Several board members from Montgomery Tech stand in a corner, their expressions somber but eyes calculating. Then there's Jeremy, holding court among a group of admirers. At 31, my son has grown into a handsome man with Patricia's high cheekbones and my height. His custom suit probably cost more than my car. He's mid-anecdote when he spots me, his smile faltering momentarily before he excuses himself and strides over. "Dad, didn't expect to see you here." His tone makes it clear I'm an unwelcome surprise. "Your mother invited me," I reply simply. Jeremy laughs, the sound lacking warmth. Classic mom, always with the dramatic gestures. "Well, don't get your hopes up. This is just a formality." He leans closer, lowering his voice. "I already know what's in the will. We discussed it extensively before she got too sick. The lawyers are just going through the motions." Before I can respond, a young woman appears at Jeremy's side. She's striking, with the polished look of someone accustomed to wealth. "Babe, everyone's asking about the Aspen expansion," she says, barely acknowledging my presence. "Natalie, this is Hudson Montgomery, my father." Jeremy introduces me with obvious reluctance. "Dad, this is Natalie Sinclair, my fiancée." I extend my hand. "Nice to meet you, Natalie. I didn't know Jeremy was engaged." She offers a brief handshake. "Recent development. We're thinking spring wedding at the Lake Como property. Congratulations to you both." Jeremy checks his watch impatiently. "We should head in. I've got a board meeting at 3. As we enter the conference room, I notice Jeremy greeting people with the confidence of someone who knows his position is about to be further elevated. He discusses future plans openly, talking about restructuring the executive team and expanding into Asian markets. The others listen attentively, already deferring to him as Patricia's successor. Mr. Harrington, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, calls the room to order. Nearly 30 people take seats around a massive conference table and along the walls. I choose a chair near the back, trying to remain inconspicuous. "Thank you all for coming today," Mr. Harrington begins. "We're here to execute the last will and testament of Patricia Ann Montgomery. Before we begin, Mrs. Montgomery recorded a brief message she wished to be played at this gathering." He activates a screen on the wall, and Patricia appears. The video was clearly recorded in her final weeks. Despite her illness, she's immaculately dressed and composed, the consummate businesswoman until the end. "If you're watching this, I've moved on to whatever comes next," she says with a slight smile. "I want to thank everyone who supported me throughout my life and career. Montgomery Tech has been my greatest professional achievement, but it began as a shared dream. I ask that you respect the decisions I've made regarding my estate, as they reflect my final wishes after much careful consideration." The video ends, and Mr. Harrington opens a leather portfolio. I'll now proceed with the formal reading. The initial portions of the will are unsurprising. Patricia leaves specific personal items to friends and family, donations to various charities, and trusts for several godchildren. As expected, the bulk of the estate, including her controlling interest in Montgomery Tech, is designated to Jeremy. Jeremy sits straighter, unable to completely hide his satisfaction. He catches my eye across the room and mouths, "Told you." Then he turns to Natalie, squeezing her hand in triumph. "Now, regarding the disposition of Mrs. Montgomery's primary assets, including her 75% ownership of Montgomery Tech Solutions and liquid assets, totaling approximately $250 million, Mr. Harrington continues." Jeremy interrupts, standing to address the room. "If I may, Mr. Harrington. Mother and I discussed her succession plan extensively. As her only child and current executive vice president, I'm prepared to outline our strategic vision for the company moving forward." He launches into what sounds like a rehearsed speech about honoring Patricia's legacy, while embracing innovation. Several board members nod approvingly. I watch my son, marveling at how much he resembles Patricia in his confidence and charisma, yet missing the genuine passion for creating something meaningful that once drove both of us. "Thank you, Mr. Montgomery," Mr. Harrington says when Jeremy finally pauses. "However, there is a codicil to your mother's will that must be addressed before proceeding." Jeremy's smooth expression falters. "A codicil? What are you talking about?" "An amendment to the will, executed by Mrs. Montgomery 8 days before her passing," Mr. Harrington explains, removing a sealed envelope from his portfolio. Mrs. Montgomery left explicit instructions that this envelope be opened only during this reading, with all named parties present. The room grows quiet as Mr. Harrington carefully breaks the seal. Inside is another envelope, a USB drive, and several aged documents. Mrs. Montgomery indicated that certain conditions must be verified before the final disposition of her estate can be determined, he continues. She left a video message explaining these conditions. Jeremy returns to his seat, confusion evident on his face. "This is ridiculous. I was with Mother almost daily during her final weeks. She never mentioned any codicil or conditions." Mr. Harrington inserts the USB drive into his laptop, and once again, Patricia appears on screen. She looks even more frail in this recording, suggesting it was made very near the end. "If this portion of my will is being read, then all required parties are present," she begins, her voice weaker but determined. "What follows will be difficult for many of you to hear, but it represents the truth I was too cowardly to acknowledge for many years." She takes a labored breath. "Before my final wishes can be executed, certain documents must be examined and verified. These pertain to the original founding of Montgomery Tech Solutions and subsequent events during my divorce from Hudson Montgomery." The atmosphere in the room shifts perceptibly. People exchange glances, uncertain where this is heading. Jeremy leans forward, his earlier confidence replaced by growing concern. Mr. Harrington pauses the video and removes the aged documents from the envelope. "These appear to be original incorporation papers and early shareholder agreements," he says, examining them carefully. "This is completely unnecessary," Jeremy protests. "The company ownership was settled decades ago." "Nevertheless, your mother's instructions are very specific," Mr. Harrington replies firmly. "We must proceed as directed." He resumes the video, and Patricia continues. I've included a sealed letter containing information that must be verified independently by Mr. Harrington before the final terms of my will can be executed. I ask for everyone's patience as this process unfolds. The video ends, and Mr. Harrington opens the second envelope, reading its contents silently. His expression remains professional, but I notice a slight widening of his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears we need to continue this reading in a more private setting," he announces. "According to Mrs. Montgomery's instructions, the next portion should be attended only by Jeremy Montgomery, Hudson Montgomery, myself, and Mrs. Montgomery's siblings." Murmurs of surprise fill the room. Jeremy stands again, visibly agitated. "This is my mother's will. Anything pertaining to her estate concerns me directly. Whatever game she's playing from beyond the grave, let's get it over with right now, in front of everyone." Mr. Harrington remains calm. "I understand your frustration, Mr. Montgomery, but I'm bound by your mother's explicit legal instructions. If you prefer, we can adjourn and reschedule when you've had time to consider." Jeremy glances around the room, aware of all eyes on him. Backing down would show weakness. "Fine," he says tersely. "Let's continue in your private office." Now, as the other attendees reluctantly file out, Jeremy approaches me, his voice low and threatening. "You get $3, Dad," he smirks, though I can see tension behind his confidence. "That's all Mom ever intended for you. A symbolic gesture to remind you what you threw away. I'm ready to inherit my mother's $250 million fortune." I say nothing, following Mr. Harrington toward his private office. Whatever Patricia planned, the next revelation would clearly change everything. I quietly wait for the lawyer to read the next page of what's proving to be a far more complicated will than anyone expected. Mr. Harrington's private office reflects his status at the firm, with leather-bound law books lining the walls and a view of Lake Michigan through floor-to-ceiling windows. Samantha and Alan take seats on a leather sofa, while Jeremy paces impatiently. I choose an armchair near the window, watching storm clouds gather over the lake, mirroring the tension in the room. "This is completely unnecessary," Jeremy says for the third time. "Whatever Mother thought she was doing with this theatrical production, the outcome remains the same. The company is mine." "That was always the plan. Perhaps we should allow Mr. Harrington to proceed," Samantha suggests quietly. "My former sister-in-law had always been the diplomatic one in the family." Mr. Harrington connects the USB drive to his computer again. Mrs. Montgomery prepared a second, more detailed video to be viewed only by those present in this room. She was most explicit about this limitation. The screen comes to life, showing Patricia in what appears to be her home study. She looks exhausted but determined, seated in a wheelchair with medical equipment visible in the background. "If you're watching this, then the preliminary conditions of my will have been met," she begins. "What I'm about to share will be painful for everyone, especially my son. But after a lifetime of convenient lies, I owe you all the truth." Patricia takes a sip of water, gathering her strength. "First, I must address you, Hudson. The dissolution of our marriage and company partnership was not what it seemed. The evidence presented during our divorce was largely fabricated." Jeremy makes a sound of disbelief, but Patricia continues. "I manipulated financial records and corporate documents, with the help of certain executives who stood to benefit from your removal. The allegations about your mismanagement were false, created to give me leverage in the proceedings." The room is dead silent. I feel a strange numbness, hearing the confession of something I had suspected but could never prove. "There was no legitimate legal basis for stripping you of your rightful 50% ownership," Patricia continues. "The company restructuring that diluted your shares was orchestrated through falsified board minutes and backdated agreements." She looks directly into the camera, her eyes filled with regret. "I convinced myself it was justified because I believed I could take the company further than we could together. I was wrong, and the cost of that mistake has been incalculable." Jeremy stops pacing. "This is absurd. She's clearly not in her right mind in this video. The medication, the illness." Mr. Harrington raises a hand for silence as Patricia continues. "My relationship with Travis Jenkins was another calculated move. He approached me with information about potential security vulnerabilities in our systems, threatening to leak them to competitors if I didn't buy his silence. The affair began as a way to control him, but it spiraled into something uglier." Patricia pauses, visibly struggling. After the divorce, Travis's demands grew. He had copies of the falsified documents and used them to secure an executive position and gradually increase his ownership stake. When he died in that boating accident 5 years ago, I thought I was finally free of the past." She shakes her head sadly. "Then I discovered he had shared the information with others, including some current board members who have been quietly blackmailing me for years." Jeremy's face has lost all color. This is slander. She's implicating people without evidence. That brings me to the most difficult part, Patricia says, as if hearing his objection. My investigation into Travis's communications led me to discover something far worse. Jeremy had been working with him behind the scenes since before the divorce. The accusation hangs in the air like a physical presence. Jeremy laughs, but it sounds hollow. This is ridiculous. I was in college when you divorced. I barely knew Travis. The evidence is contained in a secure server, accessible only with the passwords included in the sealed instructions to Mr. Harrington, Patricia continues. It includes emails between Jeremy and Travis dating back to his sophomore year at Princeton, discussing how removing Hudson from the company would fast-track Jeremy's eventual control. She looks down, gathering herself. After Travis's death, Jeremy continued his practices, forming alliances with board members willing to engage in increasingly questionable business practices. Together, they've been systematically moving company funds through a complex network of shell corporations and offshore accounts. I look at my son, trying to reconcile this accusation with the boy I had raised. His expression has shifted from disbelief to something harder, more calculating. For the past 18 months, I've been cooperating with federal investigators, Patricia reveals. Initially, I was a target of their inquiry into financial irregularities at Montgomery Tech. To protect myself and the company, I provided evidence implicating others while minimizing my own involvement. She pauses again, her breath labored. But as my illness progressed, I could no longer justify the deception. 3 months ago, I gave the FBI complete access to all records, including those documenting my own culpability in the original fraud against Hudson. The revelation stuns everyone in the room. Patricia Montgomery, celebrated business leader and philanthropist, confessing to years of fraud and corporate malfeasance. The most painful discovery came just 6 weeks ago, she continues, tears now visible in her eyes. While reviewing medical records for the investigation, federal agents found evidence suggesting my cancer diagnosis had been known to certain parties months before I was informed. She looks directly into the camera again. My oncologist believes that with earlier intervention, my prognosis might have been significantly different. Instead, treatment was delayed through a series of lost test results and rescheduled appointments. Patricia wipes her eyes. Jeremy had been accessing my private medical records through his relationship with administrative staff at Northwestern Memorial. He knew about the cancer 3 months before I did. The federal investigation includes evidence that he deliberately interfered with my diagnosis to accelerate his inheritance. Jeremy jumps to his feet. Stop this, right now. This is insane. She was paranoid at the end. Everyone knew it. These are the delusions of a dying woman. Samantha gasps, her hand covering her mouth. Alan sits frozen, eyes wide with shock. I know this is difficult to believe, Patricia acknowledges in the video. I struggled to accept it myself, but the evidence is irrefutable and has been secured by federal authorities. She straightens in her wheelchair, summoning her remaining strength. I cannot undo the harm I've caused, particularly to you, Hudson, but I can attempt to right my greatest wrong. The amended terms of my will reflect this intention and will be revealed by Mr. Harrington following this video. Patricia's expression softens. Jeremy, despite everything, you are my son and I love you. What you've done is inexcusable, but I hope someday you'll understand that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or power. I learned that lesson far too late. The video ends, leaving the room in stunned silence. Jeremy recovers first, pulling out his phone. This is libelous nonsense. I'm calling Graham right now, he says, referring to his personal attorney. We'll have this entire farce thrown out of court by tomorrow morning. Mr. Harrington remains unperturbed. Before you make that call, Mr. Montgomery, I should inform you that I've already verified the authenticity of all documents mentioned in Mrs. Montgomery's statement. The sealed instructions included access to a secure server containing extensive evidence supporting her claims. You had no right to access any of that without my knowledge, Jeremy shouts. As her primary heir, those servers are my property now. Actually, those servers were transferred to federal custody last week, Mr. Harrington replies calmly. A team of forensic accountants has been analyzing their contents under court order. Jeremy's composure cracks completely. He whirls toward me, his face contorted with rage. You knew about this, didn't you? This has your fingerprints all over it. You've been plotting with her, turning her against me. I shake my head, still processing everything I've heard. I knew nothing about any of this, Jeremy. Your mother never told me. Liar, he screams. You've always been jealous of my success, of how much better I've made the company since you were forced out. Mr. Harrington intervenes. Mr. Montgomery, please control yourself. There's more to discuss regarding your mother's will. Jeremy isn't listening. He stalks toward me, finger pointed accusingly. You think this changes anything? I still control the board. I have allies. Your outdated vision could never attract. Whatever mother thought she was doing, it's too late. Actually, I say quietly, finding my voice, I think you might be mistaken about that. All eyes turn to me. For the first time since entering the building, I feel a strange sense of calm. What are you talking about? Jeremy demands. I stand up slowly. I'm not as ignorant of the company's operations as you might think. After discovering certain discrepancies in publicly filed documents, I began my own investigation 8 years ago. Jeremy's expression changes, from anger to uncertainty. I hired a private investigator to look into unusual patterns in the company's international transactions, I continue. Initially, I was concerned about protecting my remaining 20% interest. What we found was much more troubling. I reach into my jacket pocket and remove a small flash drive. This contains 7 years of documentation tracking funds moved through shell companies in the Caymans, Luxembourg, and Singapore. It includes recorded conversations between you and several board members discussing methods to artificially inflate quarterly earnings. Jeremy's face drains of color. You're bluffing. I never intended to use this information, I say, honestly. Despite everything, you're my son. I hoped you would eventually correct course on your own. I kept gathering evidence only as insurance to protect what remained of my stake in the company. I turned to Mr. Harrington. I assume Patricia somehow obtained a copy of my files? The lawyer nods. Mrs. Montgomery mentioned in her private instructions that she received an anonymous delivery of this information approximately 1 year ago. It corresponded with her decision to cooperate with federal authorities. Jeremy looks from me to Mr. Harrington and back again, his confident demeanor completely shattered. This is a setup, he says weakly. You can't prove any of this. A knock at the office door interrupts us. Mr. Harrington's assistant enters, looking apologetic. I'm sorry to interrupt, sir, but there are federal agents in reception asking to speak with Mr. Jeremy Montgomery. Jeremy stares at the assistant, then at me, realization dawning in his eyes. The empire he thought was securely his is crumbling around him. In that moment, I don't see the ruthless executive he's become, but glimpses of the little boy who once sat on my shoulders, pointing excitedly at the stars. I can make this go away, Jeremy says desperately, lowering his voice. Dad, whatever they're offering you, I can double it. The company needs me. You don't understand the deals in progress, the commitments I've made. I shake my head sadly. Some things can't be bought, Jeremy. Some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. Mr. Montgomery, Mr. Harrington interjects gently. Perhaps you should speak with the federal agents. Afterward, we can continue our discussion of your mother's will. Jeremy straightens his tie, struggling to regain composure. This isn't over, he says, but the threat sounds hollow even to his own ears. I'm calling Graham right now. No one is saying anything else until my attorney is present. As Jeremy strides from the office, phone already pressed to his ear, I wonder what Patricia would think of this moment. The dynasty she sacrificed our marriage to build is collapsing under the weight of the very values she abandoned. Mr. Harrington watches Jeremy leave, then turns to me with an expression I can't quite decipher. Perhaps now we can proceed to the actual terms of Mrs. Montgomery's amended will, he says. I believe you'll find them quite illuminating, Mr. Montgomery. The next 30 minutes unfold like scenes from a movie I'm watching rather than experiencing. Jeremy returns with 2 FBI agents, his face a mask of controlled fury. His attorney, Graham Reynolds, arrives shortly after, a serious man in an expensive suit who immediately demands a private consultation with his client. While they confer in a separate room, Mr. Harrington explains to Samantha, Alan, and me that the federal investigation has been ongoing for nearly 2 years, focusing on securities fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering through Montgomery Tech's international subsidiaries. Patricia became a cooperating witness 9 months ago, he explains, initially to save herself, but eventually providing comprehensive evidence of all parties involved. Including her own culpability in the original fraud against Hudson? Samantha asks, still struggling to reconcile this new version of her sister with the woman she thought she knew. Mr. Harrington nods gravely. She was remarkably forthcoming in her final months. The federal prosecutors have agreed to consider her cooperation and subsequent efforts to make restitution in any posthumous actions against her estate. The door opens, and Jeremy returns with his lawyer and the FBI agents. He's regained some composure, but his eyes dart nervously around the room. "My client has agreed to answer questions as part of an ongoing investigation," Reynolds announces formally. He maintains his complete innocence of any wrongdoing, and is confident this misunderstanding will be resolved quickly. The taller FBI agent, who introduced himself as Special Agent Winters, addresses Jeremy directly. "We'd like you to accompany us to our field office to formalize your statement." "Am I under arrest?" Jeremy demands. "Not at this time," Agent Winters replies. "We're extending the courtesy of a voluntary interview given your position and your recent loss. However, we do have a warrant to search your residence and offices." Jeremy turns to me, his expression hardening. "This is what you wanted all along, isn't it? To see me humiliated? To destroy what Mother built because you couldn't accept that she chose success over you?" I meet my son's gaze steadily. "What I wanted was for you to become the man I thought I was raising. Someone who understood that integrity matters more than profit margins. Someone who wouldn't delay his mother's cancer diagnosis to accelerate his inheritance." Jeremy flinches at this last accusation. For a moment, his mask slips, and I glimpse something that might be shame, but it's quickly replaced by calculation. "Dad, this has gotten out of hand," he says, lowering his voice and stepping closer. Whatever Mother thought she discovered, she was confused at the end. The medications, the pain. He glances at the federal agents who are speaking quietly with Mr. Harrington. "I have access to funds that don't appear in any company records," he continues urgently. "Enough to make this whole situation disappear. We could work together, rebuild our relationship. I know I've been distant, but that can change. The offer hangs between us, nakedly transactional. My son is attempting to bribe me to withhold evidence in a federal investigation, seemingly unaware of how far he's fallen. When you were 10, I say quietly, you saved for months to buy a baseball signed by Sammy Sosa. Remember that?" Jeremy blinks, thrown by the change of subject. "What does that have to do with anything? You discovered later it was a forgery. Some unscrupulous dealer had faked the signature. You were heartbroken." Jeremy shifts impatiently. "Dad, we don't have time for nostalgia. You insisted on reporting the seller to the Better Business Bureau," I continue. "Even though the money was already spent, you said it wasn't right to let him keep cheating other kids. You were so passionate about doing the right thing." Something flickers in Jeremy's eyes. Recognition. Perhaps even regret. "That boy understood something the man seems to have forgotten," I say. "Some things matter more than money. I can't help you hide from this, Jeremy. Not anymore." Jeremy's expression hardens again. "Then you're a fool. All your principled stands have ever gotten you is pushed aside while others succeeded. Mother understood how the real world works. She knew what it took to win. And look where that got her in the end," I reply sadly. "Dying alone, trying desperately to undo her mistakes. If you're not with me, you're against me," Jeremy says coldly. "When this is over, and it will be over, I'll remember who stood where." Agent Winters approaches, ending our conversation. "Mr. Montgomery, we're ready to depart." Jeremy straightens his suit jacket and nods to his attorney. "Let's get this farce over with." As he moves toward the door, he pauses beside Mr. Harrington. "Whatever theatrics my mother planned with her will, they're irrelevant now. As her only child, I'm contesting any provisions that attempt to disinherit me. We'll let the courts sort it out." Mr. Harrington remains unruffled. "That is certainly your prerogative, Mr. Montgomery. However, the amended will contain specific provisions anticipating such a challenge. Perhaps you'd like to hear them before making decisions that might further complicate your situation." Jeremy hesitates, clearly torn between his desire to appear in control and his curiosity about his mother's final actions. "My client will return to complete the will reading after his interview," Reynolds interjects smoothly. "Given the circumstances, I'm sure everyone understands the priority of addressing these baseless allegations." As Jeremy leaves with the agents and his attorney, the tension in the room deflates slightly. Samantha comes to sit beside me, her eyes red-rimmed, but dry. "Did you know?" she asks quietly. "About any of this?" I shake my head. I suspected financial irregularities, yes, but the extent of it, Patricia's involvement in the original fraud, Jeremy's. I can't bring myself to finish the sentence. "I always thought you two just grew apart," she says. Patricia never talked much about the divorce, and I didn't press. She seemed so sure she was doing the right thing for the company. Alan joins us, his expression troubled. I introduced her to Travis Jenkins at a charity gala. I thought he was just an ambitious young executive, if I had known. None of us saw the full picture, I reassure him. Patricia was always skilled at compartmentalizing her life. Mr. Harrington clears his throat. If you're amenable, we could proceed with reading the amended will while we wait for Mr. Montgomery's return. Mrs. Montgomery was explicit that both of you, he nods to Samantha and Alan, should be present for this portion as well. I glance out the window at the darkening sky over Lake Michigan. Storm clouds have gathered, and rain begins to streak the glass. It seems fitting somehow, this physical manifestation of the turbulence we're all experiencing. Yes, I say, turning back to face whatever Patricia's final act might be. Let's hear what she had to say. Mr. Harrington retrieves another sealed envelope from his desk. This contains the executed codicil to Patricia Montgomery's will, signed and witnessed 8 days before her passing. It substantially alters the disposition of her estate. He breaks the seal and unfolds several pages of legal documents. I'll summarize the key provisions in plain language, though the full text is available for your review. Samantha reaches for Alan's hand as Mr. Harrington begins reading. First, regarding personal bequests, Mrs. Montgomery leaves her Lake Michigan estate to her sister, Samantha Green, along with a cash bequest of $5 million. Samantha gasps softly. She and her husband had struggled financially for years, something Patricia had acknowledged but never substantially addressed. To her brother, Alan Montgomery, she leaves her collection of art and antiquities, valued at approximately $12 million, along with a cash bequest of $5 million. Alan shakes his head in disbelief. She always said those would go to museums. To her friend Diane Collins, she leaves her vacation properties in Aspen and Palm Beach, along with a cash bequest of $3 million. Mr. Harrington continues. He turns a page. Several longtime employees receive significant bequests ranging from $1 to $2 million each, including her personal assistant, housekeeper, and driver. The list continues with smaller bequests to various friends and charitable organizations. Then Mr. Harrington pauses, looking up at me. Now, regarding the primary assets, including her 75% ownership stake in Montgomery Tech Solutions and remaining liquid assets, totaling approximately $190 million. He clears his throat. To her son, Jeremy Montgomery, Mrs. Montgomery leaves the sum of $3. Despite everything that's happened, the amount is shocking. Not a token inheritance, but a deliberate statement. The will specifies that this amount represents $1 for each of the 3 core values that Jeremy was taught but chose to abandon: honesty, compassion, and family loyalty. I close my eyes briefly, remembering countless dinner table conversations where Patricia and I had emphasized these values to our young son. The irony that she would invoke them now, after her own betrayal of those same principles, isn't lost on me. Mr. Harrington continues reading. The codicil includes a detailed explanation of this decision, citing the evidence of Jeremy's corporate malfeasance, personal betrayals, and, most significantly, his interference with Mrs. Montgomery's medical care. Samantha wipes away tears. I can't believe Patricia knew all this and never said anything to me. The document specifies that should Jeremy contest the will, a complete dossier of his activities will be released to the media and additional evidence provided to regulatory authorities, Mr. Harrington adds. Mrs. Montgomery explicitly states that this is not intended as blackmail, but as an incentive for Jeremy to accept the consequences of his actions and begin the process of redemption. Alan shakes his head. Always the chess player, thinking 3 moves ahead. Mr. Harrington turns to the final page. As to the remainder of her estate, including her controlling interest in Montgomery Tech Solutions and all associated assets, Mrs. Montgomery leaves everything to her former husband, Hudson Montgomery. The words hang in the air, almost incomprehensible. Additionally, Mr. Harrington continues, Mrs. Montgomery has attached a personal letter of apology, acknowledging the fraudulent nature of their divorce proceedings and expressing her desire that this bequest serve as partial restitution for the wrong done to you. I sit frozen, unable to process what I'm hearing. After 20 years, countless sleepless nights wondering where things went wrong, Patricia had finally acknowledged the truth. The will stipulates that 15% of the company's annual profits be directed to a newly established foundation for business ethics education, to be named the Montgomery Integrity Project. Mr. Harrington adds. Mrs. Montgomery expresses hope that the company can be restored to its original ethical foundations under your leadership. He sets down the documents. There are numerous technical details regarding the transition of ownership and management, but those can be addressed separately. Do you have any immediate questions, Mr. Montgomery? I struggle to find words. This is unexpected. Patricia spent her final months planning this carefully, Samantha says quietly. She was determined to set things right. Did she really think this would fix anything? I ask, more to myself than the others. A deathbed confession, and returning what was wrongfully taken in the first place? She knew it wouldn't erase the past, Alan offers, but it was the only reparation left available to her. Mr. Harrington reaches into his desk drawer and removes another envelope. Mrs. Montgomery left this personal letter for you. Her instructions were that you should read it privately. I take the envelope, feeling its weight both physical and symbolic. My name is written on the front in Patricia's elegant handwriting, slightly shakier than I remember. What happens now? I ask. With Jeremy and the federal investigation? That will proceed independently of the will, Mr. Harrington explains. Mrs. Montgomery's cooperation has already been documented. As for the company, there will be challenges ahead, certainly. The board will need to be substantially restructured, and the company may face regulatory consequences. He gives me a measured look. However, Mrs. Montgomery was confident in your ability to navigate these challenges. She specifically mentioned your technical vision and ethical leadership as qualities the company desperately needs to reclaim. A sudden commotion outside the office interrupts us. Raised voices, then the door bursts open. Jeremy stands there, his attorney, and one of the federal agents behind him. This interview is over, Jeremy announces, his composure clearly rattled. Graham has advised me not to answer further questions without additional counsel present. He surveys the room, noting our expressions. I see you've continued without me. How convenient. Mr. Montgomery, we've reviewed the amended terms of your mother's will, Mr. Harrington says calmly. I can provide you with a copy immediately. Don't bother, Jeremy snaps. Whatever ridiculous provisions she added under duress or medication will never stand up in court. I have the best estate attorneys in the country on retainer. Jeremy, I say gently, standing to face my son. Fighting this will only make things worse. Your mother left extensive evidence. My mother was manipulated in her weakened state, he interrupts furiously. Probably by you, feeding her paranoid theories about me when she was vulnerable. The federal agent steps forward. Mr. Montgomery, we need to schedule a follow-up interview for tomorrow morning. Until then, you're required to remain in the city and make yourself available. Jeremy ignores him, focusing his anger on me. Whatever she left you, it won't matter. By the time my legal team is finished, you'll wish you'd never set foot in this office. I look at my son, truly look at him, and see beyond the expensive suit and practiced arrogance to the frightened man beneath. Jeremy, this isn't about money or the company anymore. This is about facing consequences and finding a way forward with integrity. Save your lectures, he snarls. They didn't work when I was 12, and they certainly won't work now. He turns to leave, then pauses. You know what the difference is between us, Dad? I understood that principles don't pay the bills. Mother taught me that much, at least, after you were gone. After Jeremy leaves with his attorney and the federal agent, the room falls silent. The confrontation has left a palpable heaviness in the air. He's scared, Samantha observes quietly. I've never seen him like that. I nod, feeling an ache that has nothing to do with the company or money. He's facing something he can't control with wealth or connections. Maybe for the first time in his adult life, Mr. Harrington begins gathering the documents. There will be time to address all of this in greater detail. For now, I suggest everyone take some time to process today's revelations. As we prepare to leave, he hands me a business card. The transition of ownership will require several additional meetings. My office will be in touch to schedule them at your convenience. I pocket the card, still not fully comprehending my new reality. 20 years after being forced out of the company I co-founded, I'm suddenly its majority owner again. The vindication feels hollow, tainted by the pain of discovering the depths of my son's betrayal and the extent of Patricia's deception. Outside the building, rain falls steadily from a gray sky. Samantha offers me a ride, but I decline, needing time alone to think. As they drive away, I stand on the sidewalk, Patricia's unopened letter in my pocket, feeling like it weighs 100 pounds. Whatever words she wrote, whatever explanations or apologies she offered, they've come too late to salvage what we lost. Yet as I finally hail a taxi, I realize that while Patricia's redemption may have come too late for her, perhaps it's not too late for the company we built together, or even for our son. The taxi pulls away from the curb, carrying me toward an uncertain future I never expected to face. In my pocket, Patricia's final words, wait to be read, a bridge between our shared past and whatever comes next. 6 months have passed since the will reading that turned my life upside down. Spring has finally arrived in Chicago, bringing with it a sense of renewal that feels appropriate given the transformation of Montgomery Tech Solutions. The company headquarters still occupies the same gleaming skyscraper, but inside, almost everything has changed. The first weeks were chaotic, with several board members resigning immediately following the federal investigation announcements. The stock price plummeted as news of the probe leaked to the financial press, and several major clients put their contracts on hold. I remember standing in Patricia's former office, my office now staring out at the city skyline, and wondering if I had the strength to rebuild at 63, what had taken decades to create the first time. The company that had once been our shared dream had become almost unrecognizable, its culture warped by years of prioritizing profit over people and quarterly earnings over quality. You can still walk away, Frank Williams had told me when I called him out of retirement to help assess the damage. No one would blame you after what they did to you. But walking away had never been my style. I'd spent 2 decades building a modest consulting business, but the fire to create something truly meaningful had never died. And now, against all odds, I had been given a second chance. The first order of business was transparency. Rather than trying to contain the scandal, I authorized a complete internal investigation, bringing in independent auditors to review every aspect of the company's operations. The findings were sobering: systematic accounting irregularities, offshore tax avoidance schemes, and a toxic corporate culture that rewarded deception and intimidated whistleblowers. With the board's reluctant approval, I established the Patricia Montgomery Foundation for Business Ethics, dedicating 15% of annual profits as stipulated in Patricia's will. Beyond mere compliance, the foundation would actively promote ethical business practices through education programs and corporate governance research. You're basically funding an organization that will hold your own company accountable, observed Diane Collins when I unveiled the initiative. Patricia would appreciate the irony. The federal investigation continued, with prosecutors focusing primarily on Jeremy and several former executives. Through his attorneys, Jeremy maintained his innocence, portraying himself as an unwitting participant in schemes orchestrated by others. The evidence suggested otherwise, but I found no satisfaction in his downfall. 3 months after the will reading, I finally visited him at the Federal Detention Center, where he was being held pending trial. The visit required passing through multiple security checkpoints before being led to a sparse visitation room with metal tables bolted to the floor. Jeremy entered wearing a jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. Without his tailored suits and careful grooming, he looked younger, more vulnerable. For a moment, I saw echoes of the boy who had once followed me around my workshop, eager to learn how things worked. "I'm surprised you came," he said as he sat across from me, avoiding direct eye contact. "You're my son, Jeremy. That hasn't changed." He laughed bitterly. "Right. You're here out of paternal obligation. Mission accomplished. You can go now." "Actually, I'm here to talk about the future," I replied calmly. "Your future, specifically." That got his attention. "What are you talking about?" "Your mother's final letter to me," I explained. "I've read it many times these past months. Much of it was personal, her regrets, explanations for choices I'll never fully understand. But the last pages were about you." Jeremy's expression wavered between suspicion and curiosity. "Patricia believed you could be redeemed," I continued. "She thought beneath the habits and values you've adopted, the son we raised still exists. She asked me to try to reach that person, if he's still there." "Touching," Jeremy said sarcastically, but I noticed his hands trembling slightly. "Did she happen to mention the 20-year federal sentence I'm facing?" "She didn't know the specifics then, but yes, she acknowledged there would be legal consequences. What she asked is that I offer you a path forward after you've paid those consequences." I outlined the proposal I had developed with the help of the company's legal team and in consultation with federal prosecutors. A comprehensive rehabilitation program, including full cooperation with authorities, financial restitution to defrauded parties, and a supervised community service component focused on business ethics, education. In exchange for your complete cooperation, the prosecutors might consider a reduced sentence, I explained. And afterward, there could be a place for you in the company, not in management, not immediately, but working your way back from the ground up. Jeremy stared at me incredulously. "You can't be serious. You want me to admit to everything, Serve time in federal prison, and then come back to sweep floors at the company that should have been mine? What I want, I said carefully, is to offer my son a chance to rebuild his life with dignity. The company was never supposed to be an entitlement, Jeremy. It was meant to be a legacy of values, not just value. His mask of cynicism cracked momentarily. Why would you do this? After everything that happened? Because I'm your father. Because despite everything, I believe people can change when they're finally ready to see themselves clearly. We talked for nearly 2 hours that day, moving from hostility to grudging consideration. Jeremy wasn't ready to accept my offer, but he didn't reject it outright either. It was a small opening, the first real conversation we'd had in years. As spring progressed into summer, the company began to stabilize. Several key clients returned after seeing our commitment to reform. We rehired valued employees who had left during the previous regime and implemented a profit-sharing program for all staff members, an idea Patricia and I had discussed in the early days but never implemented. The massive Lake Michigan estate where Patricia spent her final years was sold, with proceeds going to the foundation. I chose instead to purchase a comfortable 4-bedroom house, reminiscent of our first family home, in a neighborhood where I could walk to local shops and restaurants. On a warm July evening, I visited Patricia's grave for the first time since the funeral. The cemetery was peaceful, with ancient oaks providing shade over carefully tended grounds. Her headstone was elegant but not ostentatious, with her name, dates, and a simple inscription, "Seeker of Truth, Eventually." I placed a small bouquet of wildflowers, the kind she used to gather during our weekend hikes when we were first married, and sat on a nearby bench. "We made quite a mess of things, didn't we?" I said quietly to the headstone. "But I'm trying to fix it, one piece at a time." I took out her letter, now worn from multiple readings. The final paragraph still moved me deeply. "Hudson, I have no right to ask your forgiveness. What I did to you was unforgivable, motivated by greed and ambition that I mistook for vision. I tell myself I lost my way, but the truth is simpler. I chose the wrong path with open eyes. My only comfort is knowing that you, with your unshakable integrity, are the right person to restore what I corrupted. And perhaps, if there's any justice in this world, you might help our son find his way back to the values we once shared. I loved you then, I love you still, and I will love you beyond whatever comes next. Patricia." That evening, I received an unexpected call from Jeremy's attorney. After months of maintaining his innocence, Jeremy had decided to accept a plea agreement. In exchange for his testimony against several board members and executives, he would serve 5 years in a minimum security facility, followed by 5 years of supervised release. "He asked me to tell you he's ready to talk about that program you proposed," the attorney said. "Something about starting from the ground up." The news brought a complex mixture of emotions, relief, cautious hope, and a bittersweet understanding that sometimes the hardest consequences become the greatest catalysts for change. By early fall, Montgomery Tech Solutions had become a case study in corporate transformation. The business press, initially scathing in their coverage of the scandal, began writing about our ethical reforms and renewed focus on innovation. Our stock price slowly recovered as investor confidence returned. I established a mentoring program for young entrepreneurs, sharing lessons learned from both success and failure. "Profit without purpose becomes poison" became something of a personal mantra in these sessions. And "wealth without values leaves you ultimately impoverished." On a crisp October morning, almost exactly 1 year after Patricia's death, I drove to the transitional facility, where Jeremy had been transferred after providing substantial assistance to federal prosecutors. He was allowed day passes for community service, supervised by program staff. We had agreed to meet at a community center, where Jeremy had been teaching basic computer skills to unemployed workers as part of his service requirement. I arrived early and observed from the doorway as he patiently helped an older woman navigate spreadsheet basics. His appearance had changed dramatically. Gone were the designer clothes and carefully styled hair. He wore simple khakis and a button-down shirt, his hair shorter, his face leaner, but somehow more at peace than I had seen in years. When the class ended, we walked to a nearby park. The fall colors were at their peak, maples and oaks creating a canopy of red and gold above us. "The program supervisor says, 'You've been exemplary,'" I remarked, as we found a bench overlooking a small pond. "She mentioned you've been putting in extra hours with the adult literacy project." Jeremy shrugged, but I caught a glimpse of pride in his expression. "It's nothing special, just trying to be useful." "It is special," I countered. "Finding purpose in helping others always is." We sat quietly for a moment, watching leaves drift onto the pond's surface. I've been thinking about what happens after all this, Jeremy said finally. Your offer to work my way back into the company. The offer stands, whenever you're ready. He turned to face me directly. Why would you trust me again? After everything I did? The question was asked without his former cynicism, a genuine inquiry from someone trying to understand forgiveness. Trust isn't given in a single piece, I replied. It's rebuilt, day by day, decision by decision. We'll start small and go from there. Jeremy nodded thoughtfully. I found Mom's old journals and some of my things that were put in storage. From the early days of the company. She wrote about how you insisted on quality when everyone was pushing for faster releases. How you fought for employee benefits when the board wanted to cut costs. Those weren't always popular positions, I acknowledged. But they were right, Jeremy said quietly. I see that now. Too late, but I see it. We continued walking, our conversation, turning to practical matters about his eventual transition from the facility to a halfway house program I'd helped establish specifically for white-collar offenders, focusing on rehabilitation through community service. Before I left, Jeremy handed me a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. I found this while sorting through old files for the prosecutors. I thought you might want it. Inside was a faded photograph I hadn't seen in decades. Patricia and me standing proudly in front of our first office space, arms around each other, exhausted but exhilarated after landing our first major client. Written on the back in Patricia's handwriting, Day 1 of Forever, the Montgomery Dream Team. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved by the gesture. This means a lot. Jeremy nodded, a flicker of the sun I remembered briefly visible beneath the layers of mistakes and consequences. See you next week? Count on it. I promised. The following Sunday, Jeremy was granted a supervised day pass to help plant trees at a community garden I had helped fund through the foundation. The project was converting an abandoned lot into green space in an underserved neighborhood. We worked side by side, digging holes for saplings that wouldn't reach maturity for decades. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us planting something that requires patience, care, and faith in a future we might not personally see. As we patted soil around a young oak tree, Jeremy paused, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cool autumn air. Do you think we can really fix things, Dad? Not just the company, but everything else? I considered the question carefully, thinking of Patricia's final letter, the company's ongoing transformation, and this moment of connection with my son that had seemed impossible a year ago. I think what's broken can be healed, though it may not look exactly the same afterward, I answered honestly. Some damages leave scars, but often, what's rebuilt is stronger for having been broken and mended. Jeremy nodded slowly, his hands still resting on the freshly turned earth around the sapling. I'd like to believe that. Then let's start there, I said, with belief in the possibility of renewal. As the afternoon light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the garden, I reflected on the twists and turns that had brought us to this moment. Patricia's deathbed confession and unexpected bequest had set in motion a chain of events I could never have anticipated. The company was healing. My relationship with Jeremy was cautiously rebuilding. And somewhere along the way, I had found a piece I thought was permanently lost. True wealth, I realized, isn't measured in dollars or property or power. It's calculated in moments of genuine connection, in work that serves a purpose greater than self-enrichment, and in the courage to begin again after devastating loss. Jeremy and I continued working until sunset, planting trees in what had once been abandoned ground, creating the foundation for something new to grow. Like the saplings we carefully placed in the soil, our future remained uncertain, but full of possibility. And for today, that was enough. Have you ever experienced a situation where forgiveness seemed impossible, but somehow became your path to freedom? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. This journey of pain, betrayal, and ultimate redemption taught me that sometimes the greatest inheritances aren't measured in dollars, but in the wisdom we gain through our hardest experiences. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that second chances are always possible, even when they seem impossible. Thank you for listening, and remember that true wealth lies in integrity and relationships, not money. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.